Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Today, I want to talk to you right off the bat about an artist dear to my heart that I've grown more and more in love with over the last year, year and a half, and listened to more and more of his albums, which I have over 50 of. And if you're in my Facebook groups, you've been seeing me post some of these records, so you probably know where this is going. I made an episode on him 2 years ago, but I've learned so much, and there's some mistakes I need to correct, including one that's quite uh, shocking and illuminating, I guess. But Sonny is just a fantastic. Sonny Stitt is a fantastic player. Uh, he first comes on the scene in the bebop era. He works his way up through some R&B groups. He was initially accused of being a Charlie Parker imitator. And even when the first time he met Parker, Parker said, "You sound like me." And Stitt's response was, "I sound like myself. This is how I play. I don't know how else to play." And this was early on in the mid 40s when this encounter happens. And of course, then Stitt also plays the tenor at times in his career. And the tenor, he himself says he sounded more like Lester Young, with a hint of Ben Webster. But I think Sonny Stitt's very dismissed by a lot of collectors today, mistakenly so. I think a lot of people don't want to take on the challenge of his big discography. It takes a lot to get to know him. It's John Coltrane like in size over a much longer period of time. It's often dismissed as uh, not irrelevant, but just a lot of it's just him blowing and it all sounds the same, and that's really not the case. There's a great deal of variation in his work. Uh, it's I just want to build a case for collecting Sonny Stitt's records. I think they're for value. They're as good a value as you're going to get in the jazz canon today by a giant, and he was seen far greater in the day than he is today by most of his peers and contemporaries. He was a highly illuminated figure that was held in fairly high regard in most circles. He had his own way of doing things. I think the fact he never had a working band per se has also made people feel less willing to collect him because they don't know where to start. They don't know when you start with Coltrane. Okay, I'm gonna go for the Coltrane Quartet. When you start with Miles, like, I'm gonna go for the Miles Quintet or the great Miles Second Quintet. You have these bands that you kind of identify with. They give you a starting place. With Stitt, you don't quite get that. Although, having done more research for this episode, I've certainly seen there are some figures and factors that do repeat themselves, and he does have certain go-to musicians in certain eras. But I've also read this recently, Jazz Wax article by Mark Myers. I read it online. I think this might have originally been in print from 2010, March 29th. And I want to read a few quotes from it over the course of this because I don't want everything always just to be my opinion or my thoughts. I give you plenty of that. Sometimes I want there to be informative stuff where we kind of both learn together. And I want to share my passion for Stitt, but I also want it to be more than just me saying so. So this is Mark Myers. He's a pretty well-known jazz writer. Uh, I don't read a ton of jazz stuff, if I'm honest. It can shape you too much. I'm to the point where I'd rather listen to a record myself and form my own opinion. And I'd rather read a review or opinion on a record that I'm familiar with than one on a record I don't know. It could too powerfully send you down a certain path, positively or negatively. And I'd rather build my own opinion based off my own ear, my own experience, my own insight, my own heart, how it feels about it, the mood it sets. I don't need to have that pre-shaped for me. So I don't read a lot of that kind of stuff. But when I'm into an artist and have started to formulate my own opinions, that's when I will more seek out stuff like this Sonny Stitt. And I actually had my wife print this off for me. It's a few pages long. And I just want to read certain parts. He opens by saying, "You either love Sonny Stitt or you're completely unfamiliar with the saxophonist." And I find that to be quite true. People either love him or they're not. They don't really know. Uh, and if you're as crazy about Stitt as I am, then you know it's almost impossible to collect his records. There are simply too many of them. When I was a kid back in the 70s, I worked at a record store in New York and received a decent discount on LPs. After hearing Stitt's "You Talk That Talk," the tenor saxophonist Gene Ammons, I went nuts. I'd go see Stitt at the clubs in Boston and New York whenever I could in the mid 70s. I also tried to build a Stitt collection. I assembled a pretty impressive 2 feet of album spines before I finally threw in the towel. And around the 30th LP, I realized I hadn't even dented the guy's catalog. And I'm proud to say I have pretty much everything from the early 50s through into about 65, 66. There's one record in particular, Sonny Stitt Goes Latin. I always passed on for years. I thought that was going to be kind of campy. Since heard it's actually got a great group, and it's a bossa nova thing, not just a Latin thing. And I wish I grabbed it when I'd seen it cheap, because now it seems to have tripled in price from when I used to see it all the time. And I think partly why he writes this article is there's a Mosaic box set that came out, and it seems like it had 9 CDs with 148 tracks documenting his Roost years. And Roost is a label that doesn't get spoken about often enough right now. I've done some stuff on Roost over the years. I love their 10-inch era, the stuff with Stan Getz and with Johnny Smith, the Beverly Kenny stuff. There's a lot of great stuff on the Roost label. But Sonny Stitt is one of the backbones and architects of the success that Roost has. And Roost is run by Teddy Reeg. I'm going to put a photo up of the guy. He was a big beast of a man, 300 plus pounds, 6 foot tall, walked in both directions at the same time. You know what I mean? A little bit of forward, a little bit of side to side, like a big man do. Got that waddle going on. But he carried that weight with it. And he was a powerful figure. He once worked at Savoy under Herman Lubinsky. And Lubinsky was such a heel, such a racist, I've not read a positive thing about him, really. So I don't hate to speak bad about a guy I never know personally. But there's not a whole lot of stuff out there saying that Herman Lubinsky was a fun guy to be around or a kind person. And there's plenty of instances of him being referred to as being a very racist and oppressive person. So again, that's just what the legacy tells me, not something I know personally about Herman Lubinsky. So if any of his family ever watched this, my apologies if he had a kind side. I don't know. But Teddy Reeg worked under Lubinsky at Savoy for a while. He was responsible for some of Savoy's most important late 40s recordings with Parker and Coleman Hawkins and a lot of the greats. And Reeg was a big kind of monstrous of a guy, but he was so favored and seen as the nice guy in that combination with Lubinsky. You know, the musicians were like, oh, Reeg's running this session. They eventually banned Lubinsky from the studio recordings. He couldn't come down anymore. Ozzy Cadena was another very important person at Savoy, and he wouldn't let Lubinsky into the sessions. He was such a negative energy from what everyone says. But Reeg left Savoy and ends up forming Roost Records based off the club, the Roost, and the Royal Roost, actually it is. And he was a hustler. He had he wasn't a pimp, but he had friends that were pimps. He wasn't a drug dealer, but he knew how to kind of hustle. And he puts the money together, gets Roost Records going, ends up kind of buying out a few partners that he had in it, and ends up kind of becoming his little vehicle. And Sonny Stitt is one of the real backbones of the Roost experience and the Teddy Reeg story. And he gets a lot of creative license when he's at Roost Records to make great stuff. And Reeg wasn't going to sit there and let you make junk. And interestingly enough, at the same time, and this is that big thing, I made a mistake on this before. I was under the impression that he, like most other artists, would be under contract with a label for 4 or 5 records, record them over a course of 16, 18 months, and then he would resign a new contract somewhere else for so many records, but that old label would still be putting out stuff from the vault, which is the case with most other artists and labels. That's the story how it goes. So for a long time, I was under the assumption that when he did his Roost recordings, they were all 53 to 56, and then he's 57. He goes to Norman Granz at Verve, and all the Roost stuff that was still coming out, stuff on Roost, I thought was vault material, which didn't make me pay as much attention to it. And it turns out that was very much a mistake. That was very much wrong. And what he's actually doing is he's signing very short contracts. 1, maybe 2 records, deals. And again, I'm not positive on this, But the dates of releases tell me some of this. And I've chatted with Scott Baldwin. I chatted with my friend Jean-Michel Riester-Beethoven. And the consensus is, and based on what we know about him, he was a free spirit. They called him the Lone Wolf. He didn't want to be tied down. So he was signing very short little contracts, which would often have him recording for multiple labels in the same year. And that's a very unique thing. And so what we find out going into the late 50s and the early 60s even, all that Roost material is actually current from those years, not just from the mid 50s, which changes how those records are going to sound, what's going to be popular in jazz, who the sidemen are going to be. So that was a big mistake I made by that assumption. And so I want to correct it. And what I'm done is break down Sonny Stitt's career year by year. I'm going to look at what he's doing from early 50s into the mid 60s and just kind of document the changing in his groups and his sounds and the different elements that were happening and the great labels he was recording for. And in the mid to late 50s, he's recording for Norman Granz at Verve and for Teddy Reeg at Roost at the same time. And he's making some incredible records with some incredible sidemen. Anyway, the Roost box set here on Mosaic was what this article was written about. And this guy's talking about how people would ask him 9 discs, is there enough diversity with that much material? Is the box really worth it? And Mark Meyer's response was, guess what? It is. All 9 discs of this 52 to 65 Roost period feature lyrical muscle and zero fat. And I actually agree 100%. This isn't just a writer selling a product. This is really a solid body of work that none of it was outtakes or filler. It was all intentionally designed sessions with great sidemen. There are quartets with pianist Jimmy Jones, Hank Jones, Dolo Coker. There are orchestras led by Johnny Richards and Quincy Jones, which I'm going to show you that stuff. There's even some organ dates with Don Patterson, a Latin session. Still at the top of his aggressive game in the 50s and 60s. And he also says, as a juvenile collector, I was always looking for albums that had what I call the Stitt surge. And that was when Stitt was on, the listener experiences a thrill right in the chest, similar to the rushy feel on the first dip of the roller coaster. The Stitt surge often featured the saxophonist double timing the improvised parts, and then squeezing off quadruple time runs for an extended period. Very engaged. When Stitt was in the groove, there was no pauses. Those improvised sections came out in one long sheet of blues thinking, sizzling with enormous energy, clarity, and enthusiasm. And again, I find myself very much agreeing with those analyses. There's times where it's thrilling listening to him do his double time and then even faster quadruple time, and just seems like it's a fresh, always blues tinge. It doesn't feel autocratic or automated or rigid, which even Coltrane can sound sometimes. Numbers can be very rigid. He always feels fresh and natural and ends up being one of the great alto and tenor players of this era. Stitt was a bebop progenitor, as I've said before, coming up in the early 40s in the bands of Tiny Bradshaw and Billy Eckstine. And I want to show you a Tiny Bradshaw record right now. This guy's responsible for The Train Keeps It Rolling, which Aerosmith did, which these are the Arbors. It's been a rock and roll kind of staple for years. Was it Big Joe Turner also? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. But a number of people have done The Train Kept It Rolling. And I know Aerosmith for sure does it. But this is Tiny Bradshaw. Great rhythm and blues. Louis and Jordan competitor. Jordan was dominating the charts in the late 40s, early 50s. And this Tiny Bradshaw and his band was kind of one of his main competitors at the time. This is a great record on the King label. And it's actually a reissue, number 501 in the King 500 series. So it's the second King LP release, but it's a reissue of number 395, a 10-inch from a little earlier. King records are great, very much nostalgic pieces. They also have a very vintage kind of look to them. And Tiny Bradshaw's a guy who I need to talk about more. He's a really great, fun player. And he also mentions Billy Eckstine here. I figured I'd show you some Billy Eckstine. Billy Eckstine was a fantastic baritone singer, a very rich baritone, cleanly enunciated vocalist kind of had a high class to him. Uh, Debonair would be a great way to describe Mr. Billy Eckstine. Blues for Sale and the love songs of Mr. B. And Billy had this big band, but it was more of a bebop big band, modern sounding. And uh, he had realized, working in Lionel Hampton's group with a few other players, this new bebop thing was going. They convinced Lionel to sign some of these younger talents. And eventually Billy goes out on his own and kind of brings bebop to the big band stage. And Billy tours with that group a lot and intersperses vocal numbers. This is some Billy Eckstine stuff on the Regent label. And I think a lot of the stuff was recorded in the 78 era. And then this is Regent on the Satellite label, repackaging it for the LP era audience. Billy, when you saw him live, he would play some fantastic bebop with this big group that had some amazing talent in it. And Sonny Stitt, was a part of what's called the Unholy Four, which was Eckstine's sax section at this time. And it featured Gene Ammons, Dexter Gordon, Sonny Stitt, and on baritone Leo Parker. The Unholy Four, they were called. And Gene Ammons is the blues and that Baptist church, the gospel. Stitt's the lone wolf with the aggressive, fast chops and bebop and explosiveness. Gordon's got that soul and that gentlemanly cloak of dishonor, because I guess they were all pretty ladies' men, young men at the time. And Leo Parker's a great baritonist who's the least famous of this group, who actually also records on King like Tiny Bradshaw with Bill Jennings. But the Unholy Four is an incredible saxophone section. Sadly, most of Billy Eckstine's recordings are vocal records. It's what the labels at Emerson Mercury, Regent Savoy, MGM, he does some stuff. I think he does some stuff on Decca. Those labels didn't want to record that bebop mess. They wanted to record that sweet candy of the Billy Eckstine voice. And so that's what got tracked. And so if there's recordings out there of the Billy Eckstine bebop big band, even if it was on some 2LP collection thing on MCA or RCA from late in the 70s or 80s, someone needs to tell me. Because I did a little research and I couldn't find nothing. I haven't dug too deep. I'm kind of hoping someone will say, oh yeah, there's this record here on such and such Columbia or whatever, and I can go find some recordings of the Unholy Four. But like I said, most of the Billy Eckstine stuff that's out there on these labels is vocal stuff. So I don't know if it's out there or not. But I guess they were just incredible. Just incredible. And a little more background on Stitt. He was born in Boston, February 2nd, 1924. So Boston's not really a great jazz city, especially for black men. A very small black population compared to most of the upper Midwest and Northeast. And he's born of a rich set of parents. Father was Ed Boatner, who was a baritone singer, composer, and a college music professor. And his mother was a classically trained pianist. And they have this young boy in February of 24, and halfway through the year, they give him up for adoption. And he gets shipped off to Michigan, to Saginaw, Michigan, which I can't imagine Saginaw being where it is on Lake Huron, having a whole lot of, I think Saginaw's on Huron, isn't it? I can't imagine Saginaw having a huge black population in 1924 when he moves there. And I'm sure he eventually goes to Detroit, but it's a tough break for young Sonny Stitt. And in high school, he changes his name to Sonny and starts referring himself as that. He doesn't really his name was Edward as well, like his father's. And I think he's kind of trying to outrun that history a lot in his life, and even proving himself. And I think it's partly why he was never tied down with anything. He was just kind of a loner and had some pain and resentment from that. And I think it fuels a lot of his music. And of course, he ended up having a lot of problems with the bottle, a lot of problems with drugs, and it shortens his lifespan somewhat, even though he does live to a pretty good age, but it was a tough go for him. Uh, it's quite the history that gets to him to where we're going to start talking about him here with his first recordings at Prestige. And in 49, he starts tracking with some pretty big talent. I remember he's already played with Eckstein's band. He's already played with Tiny Bradshaw. But now he's starting to play in some smaller groups here. And this record is called J.J. Johnson, Bud Powell, and Sonny Stitt. And it's 2 different sessions. Some of it's Stitt with Powell. Some of it's Stitt with J.J. Johnson. But it shows Stitt at a young, fiery, still spitting bebop kind of sounds. Great stuff. And that's a picture by Don Martin, is what it says in the back. Is that David Stone Martin's brother or Don Martin? I'm not sure. Be weird if it wasn't related to David Stone Martin somehow. Who knows? This is Stitt's Bits, 7133. And I actually got this record from Sweden, if I remember, a couple years ago. And it's an original pressing, beautiful album cover. And this features players like Eugene Wright on the bass, Tommy Potter, so Wright's on the bass, Art Blakey's on the drums, and Duke Jordan's on the piano, along with Junior Mance and Kenny Drew on some tracks. So again, it's culled from 3 different sessions, I think, in 4950. And this is it was released on 10 inches, all this stuff was. And then this is reissued on LP in probably 56, no, more like 58. So that's a collection of earlier stuff. As is this, number 7077, Sonny Stitt. This has Blaker and Potter and Drew and Blakey, Mance and Eugene Wright. So a lot of the same players again from 51, 52, I think this one is. And again, this comes out on the LP in this format. But all that 10-inch stuff right there was from late 40s, early 50s, from multiple sessions with some great players. And it was all 10-inch initially. Probably some of it was even on 78, I would guess. In 53, he moves to the Roost label with Teddy Reeg. And the first thing he does is this great Stitt playing the arrangements from the pen of Johnny Richards. And I spoke about Johnny Richards the other day. Great arranger, worked with Kenton, bright sounds, and this is a Burt Goldblatt cover. Pretty tough to find 10-inch from 53 of the great Sonny Stitt. Wonderful graphic. And this is an interesting piece. It's a bigger band with a lot of talented players like Don Elliott, Kai Winding, Charlie Mingus is playing the bass, Don Lamont on the drums, Al Williams on the piano. But it's got some more modern arranged pieces to it. And again, that's what arrangements bring to the table. And then the next thing he does in 54 on Roost is this jazz at the hi-hat. And this is with Dean Earl on the piano, Bernie Griggs on the bass, and Marquise Foster on the drums, which is a pretty anonymous group, if I'm honest. But another great Burt Goldblatt cover. It's a pretty intense cooking session, and the rhythm section is almost irrelevant. This is what we're here to do, is to listen to Sonny Stitt playing bebop, which is where he was in the early 50s. Now we're moving on to 55 here. And this is Sonny Stitt with Eddie Davis, The Battle of Birdland. And the two of them are just having a kind of prototypical bang it up session of throwing it down. Doc Bagby is on the organ, and Charlie Rice is on the drums. So just a simple accompaniment of the organ. Organ's also going to be playing the bass, and then the drums. And then you have the 2 tenor players battling out. And this is early Roost stuff, recorded live. And it's a pretty tough record to come by. You can find it, but it's often pretty beat up. Moving along, this is Sonny Stitt plays the arrangements from the pen of Quincy Jones. And it's a great album cover. Beautiful black and white shot of the man. Absolutely wonderful. And he's playing in a very marvelously arranged session with a lot of melancholy. And My Funny Valentine is just killer on here. And then Come Rain or Come Shine also is just a wonderful, wonderful tour de force. Let me read off the band for you on this. The rhythm section has Oscar Pettiford on the bass, Joe Jones on the drums, Freddie Green on the guitar, and Hank Jones on the piano. So right there, you're already like, okay, I'm in. Then you had your trumpet section which has Joe Newman of Basie fame, uh, Thad Jones, also Basie fame, but also of the Jones Brothers, and then Ernie Royal, another fantastic trumpet player, also who played with Basie. I think he played with Ellington a little bit too. And then you have your uh, trombone section with J.J. Johnson and Jimmy Cleveland. The two best trombone players probably ever walked the earth. J.J. Johnson and Jimmy Cleveland are on this record. And then your saxophone section has Cecil Payne on the baritone with Selden Powell on the tenor, along with on the alto you have Anthony Ortega, who's a fantastic Italian player. And so what you have there is a pretty impressive trumpet, trombone, saxophone section with an incredible rhythm section with Sonny Stitt playing the alto. And from the up-tempo numbers to the more melancholic stuff, this is a great tour de force. Fantastic record, one to look for. The next record we're going to look at here, also from 56, recorded in 55, released in 56, is 2208, Sonny Stitt. Sonny Stitt, I think it's called Plays, actually. And again, a beautiful cover. Got some smoke in the background there. Beautiful, beautiful design. And this record is the wonderful Hank Jones. Wendell Marshall's on the bass of Savoy fame, one of the house bass players over there. Shadow Wilson on the drums. And then you have the one fantastic Freddie Green playing rhythm guitar. So what you have is just, again, a small group. Totally different from what happened in the record before. By no means is that a carbon copy of the first one. And then, boom, you have them working with Dizzy Gillespie for Norman Granz. This is from 56. You have Gillespie, Stitt, John Lewis, Skeeter Best on the guitar, Percy Geese, and Charlie Persip on the bass and drums. Again, David Stone Martin album cover. So you have just an incredible body of work taking shape here. And we're still in the mid-50s here. We're going to try to move it along a little quicker. Recorded in 56, comes on 57, 37 minutes and 48 seconds of Sonny Stitt. This is with Edgar Willis on the bass, Kenny Dennis on the drums, and Dolo Coker on the piano. And Coker's a fantastic pianist. And again, just a wonderful album cover. And again, this record doesn't sound nothing like the record before it. They each have their own signature sounds and feels. Again, now for Norman Granz, kind of a cooking session, but there's some serious blues being played here for musicians only. 1957. And you have John Lewis on the piano, Ray Brown on the drums, Herb Ellis on the guitar, Stan Levy on the drums, and Stan Getz, Dizzy Gillespie, and Sonny Stitt trading riffs. So really an all-star rhythm section there. John Lewis, Ray Brown, Herb Ellis, and Stan Levy. That's pretty high level. And then three of the finest, and two of them as high on heroin as you can get, really. Of course, Dizzy, I don't think Dizzy ever succumbed to heroin the same way. Now in 57, released in 57, is Sonny Stitt with the New Yorkers. Again, this is a fantastic album. Nice, glossy album cover. And this is with Shadow Wilson on the drums, Wendell Marshall on the bass, and Hank Jones on the piano. So he's back in a small setting with these fantastic East Coast players, and just a wonderful record. I remember this. It might as well be Spring is fantastic on this. What was that other song that just really jumped out at me? I didn't know what time it was. It was fantastic. Just bubbly and full of fire. Also from 57 is New York Jazz, the Sonny Stitt Quartet. And this is with Ray Brown, Joe Jones, and Jimmy Jones on the piano. And Jimmy Jones is a fantastic pianist. 1957 on the Verve Norman Granz label. So these are all happening simultaneously, which again is not something you're going to get from very many musicians that I've come across. Now we're moving into 58, and this is on Verve, Norman Granz. It's got Ray Brown, Stan Levy, Herb Ellis on the guitar, Oscar Peterson, and Roy Eldridge on the trumpet. So you got 5 pieces of royalty playing along with the great Sonny Stitt. And you have Eldridge on trumpet, who's got a fiery, bright player with that great rhythm section. How can these records all sound the same? He's really an iconoclast. He's all over the map. This is on Argo. The same time as these other records are happening in 1958, here we are. And guess who's on this? It's actually what we've been listening to. It's Ramsey Lewis, L.D. Young, and Ike Holt, which is the Ramsey Lewis trio, backing Sonny Stitt. So he flies into Chicago, say, I might as well record a record here. I'm under contract. And he does a one-off at Argo. Great session. This is actually a shitty reissue. I need to find the original pressing of it. I will someday when I start buying records again. Back now in 58, but released in 59. Back on Roost, again with Jimmy Jones, the pianist, who he actually works with quite a lot. So the fact that he doesn't have any guys he kind of returns to, Jimmy Jones is kind of a go-to guy for quite a long period over the years. With Charlie Bursup on the drums, and the bass player is not listed for some reason. Teddy Reeves producing this again. Beautiful album cover. It's called The Saxophones of Sonny Stitt. And it's got him in a quartet setting, which is, probably one of his favorite settings, I think. Now we're also on Verve again. Again, Norman Granz. This is with Sonny Stitt, with Sonny Rollins and Dizzy Gillespie, with Tommy Bryant on the bass, Charlie Persip on the drums, and Ray Bryant. The stride, like the real fantastic rhythmic stride of Ray Bryant, a real rhythm and blues pianist. This is a pretty tough record to come by. Sunny Side Up, 1959. And now that we're in 1959, I think he puts out 8 records this year. 8 records in 1959. It's insane. This is Sonny Stitt plays Jimmy Joffrey. And so any rumor that he sounds like the same on every record, here he's got pretty much an entire West Coast sideman with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 guys, along with Jimmy Joffrey arranging and doing some playing himself. So you got Buddy Clark on the bass, Lawrence Marble on the drums, Jimmy Rowles, the great pianist, Frank Rosalino with the trombone, Jack Sheldon's on the trumpet, Larry Cateman's on the is that trumpet? I think it is. No, Katzman's what it was. And then on the tuba you have Al Paulin. And so you have this huge group with Sonny Stitt weaving his way through the traffic. And this has got some pretty interesting Jimmy Joffrey imprints on it. As we know, Joffrey's a bit of a out there fella. 59 also back on Roost, 2235, a little bit of Stitt. And this is with Jimmy Jones, the pianist, Aaron Bell, the bassist, and Charlie Persip on the drums. A great album cover. I love that album cover. That little picture of Stitt there. So he's just putting out record after record after record. And there's not a weak record in this era. This is a fantastic record back on Norman Granz's Verve, The Hard Swing. And that looks like the message is being sent, the hard swing. And again, we're 1959. George Morrow's on the bass. Clifford Brown Max Roach Group, that's him. Lenny McBrown's on the drums. And McBrownie has some great records. Pacific, he's a great, he has a couple on Riverside as well. He's a great drummer who had a couple great groups of his own. And he's a proficient sideman as well. Amos Trice is on the piano, a guy I'm not too familiar with, but this is a really solid record. It really kicks ass. I love some of the up-tempo numbers on this one. Moving on to more Verve here, 1959, sits in with the Oscar Peterson Trio. And of course, the Oscar Peterson Trio is one of the most underappreciated groups today. So many people just hear some of the softer, more commercial stuff that they did, but when you saw them live, they would knock your socks off. And that's true with Oscar Peterson in the 70s and 80s. People who didn't really love Oscar Peterson would see him live and be like, woo! And I've read and watched quite a bit of people having that opinion of him when they saw him live. They're like, okay, that guy can play. And of course, he's with Ray Brown, the world's greatest bass player in a lot of ways, and Ed Thigpen's on the drums. So the trio at this point was a drummer, a piano, and a bass player. And that changes with the guitar players at times. But Thigpen replaced a couple of the, I think, is it Herb Ellis at this point? No, Ellis probably comes after this. It was probably he's replacing Jimmy Rainey, or I can't remember. John Michelle's going to be mad at me that I'm forgetting this. But Ed Thigpen was in the group for a while. Great drummer, and he actually ends up in Denmark for a long time. So still in 59, still on Verve. This is a personal appearance. And this is with Edgar Willis on the bass, Kenny Dennis on the drums, and a young Bobby Timmons on the piano. So 1959, right around the time he's about to do some work with the Jazz Messengers, he's backing up Sonny Stitt here at Verve. And then last record 59, Sonny Stitt swings the most. And now what do we got here? Sonny Stitt swings the most on Verve, Norman Granz, 8380, a nice album cover. And then what do we have? Mel Lewis on the drums, Leroy Vinegar on the bass, and Lou Levy on the piano. And that's a West Coast group. So he's got a small four-piece cool group now. And it shows you Stitt can really graft himself into any situation. Now we're going to move on to 1960. I think he does 4 or 5 records in 1960. This is recorded in 59, released in 60. Again with Jimmy Jones on the piano, Aaron Bell and Roy Haynes on the drums here. And Haynes is one of the great drummers of that era. He shows up on infinite recordings. A little bit of dog cat hair on the needle there. But fantastic stuff. Great album cover. Again, Roy Haynes showing up is an interesting little development. Now in 60, he does his second contract, I'm guessing, for Argo. And this is called Burning. If you can see, there's a little matchstick in the middle there. And that's the album cover, just a real simple match being lit. And the group on this now has a guy by the name of Will Austin on the bass, Frank Gant is on the drums, and Barry Harris is on the piano. And Barry Harris is just starting to become a known figure. He has a record on Argo himself around this point. And Harris, of course, is one of the great teachers of jazz these last 50 years, who just passed recently. He was a professor of music in New York somewhere for a long time. This is Saxophone Supremacy, the Sonny Stitt Quartet. Again, Norman Granz. And again, I kind of overlooked this one at times. I'm like, oh, this is probably later in Norman Granz's career, 83, 77. Later in Stitt's, he's probably already left Verve at this point. But again, you got Lou Levy, Leroy Vinegar, and Mel Lewis. So again, you have this great West Coast group that you had on this one the year before. He does a record for Verve, does a record for Argo, and then he does that same group again for Verve. And then we got another one on Roost here in 1960 called Stittsville with Jimmy Jones, Roy Haynes, and the bass player is a mystery. And I'm guessing it's probably the same guy as who was on this one right here, Aaron Bell, but it's not known, so I'm not gonna state it for sure. And then Sonny Stitt Blows the Blues, back on Verve, Norman Granz, and this was once the property of a library, it looks like. Mel Lewis, Leroy Vinegar, and Lou Levy. So you get these three kind of really cool sessions that are right in with the times. He's such an interesting player. He can tackle anything, and if he feels challenged, he can kill it. From 1960, released in 61, Jimmy Jones, Aaron Bell, Roy Haynes again on Roost. I like that album cover. This album cover seems to have been impacted by Reed Miles' artwork and graphic design at Blue Note. You don't see that from Roost very often. And Roost doesn't have many years left. They're going to be bought out by Roulette eventually. Teddy Reed goes to Roulette initially, but then he goes his own separate way. This is Sonny Stitt, the DJ Lounge, number 683 on Argo, so his third Argo release. And this is with Joe Shelton on the drums, Edward Boster on the organ, and then a tenor player by the name of John Board, who I don't know at all. But again, it's a quartet session. I think it's live at this club, again on Argo. And then we're on to the next year now. I think we're at 62. And here's his first time playing with Don Patterson. And Don Patterson kind of becomes one of his new go-to. Soul jazz is starting to take off. And I think, for my money, Sonny Stitt some of the best soul jazz out there at this point. He recognizes this is going to be a bit of a bread and butter maker. And so along with guys like Willis Jackson and Gene Ammons, Sonny Stitt's making some great stuff. And he's going to be on Prestige soon enough here, where the soul jazz thing's really happening strongest. But this is with Don Patterson, the guitar player by the name of Paul Whedon, who I enjoy quite a lot, and Billy James is on the drums. And Don Patterson and Billy James make a lot of records together on organ and drums with Sonny Stitt. So this is Feelings, which is organ soul jazz. So again, you're seeing this transition. And then guess who got jumps in the game here? Atlantic. He signs a contract with Atlantic, A1395, 1962. And this has a big group on it. It's got Sonny Stitt in the top brass, it's called. And so there's quite a bit of brass players on there, really rough on the French horn. Miss Perry Lee on the organ, a gal. You got Jimmy Cleveland on the trombone with Matthew Gee on the trombone. Yeah, the trumpets of Blue Mitchell, Dick Vance, and Ronald Jones. And so you got 3 trumpets, 2 trombones, a French horn. The only saxophone is Sonny Stitt. He's playing with all that brass, and then just lone Sonny Stitt. And you have Duke Jordan on the piano, Joe Benjamin on the bass, Philly Joe Jones on the drums. And like I said, that gal on the organ, Miss Perry Lee. Doesn't sound like what happened on the last record. You got a saxophonist going up against 6 or 7 brass players. That's pretty unique. So, in 62, he also does this record here. I will itch their cough. He does this record again with Gene Ammons. And Ammons, again, him played with Eckstein all those years ago as the Unholy Four. So him and Ammons have quite a history together. And they often would show up and battle each other in clubs live. And they get a couple records together here. I think one on Prestige and one on Argo. This one's on Argo 697. It's called Dig 'Em, with John Huston on the piano, Billy Williams on the bass, and George Brown on the drums. Fairly anonymous rhythm section there. But these 2 guys are the stars of the show here. And even their personalities, you can see that these 2 aren't going to be playing around. This is a one-on-one pickup basketball game. There's going to be some words spoken. And that's just the element of competition that exists with a lot of these guys. Still in 62, we have Rearing Back on Argo. Another great album cover. Argo's really starting to move along here. They're going to have Esmond Edwards pretty soon, if they don't already. I don't think they do yet. Oh, he's already there. And Esmond Edwards works with him at Prestige and at Argo because of how they changed sides, both of them. But this is Arthur Harper on the bass, Lex Humphreys on the drums, with young Ronnie Matthews on the piano, who ends up having some great work at Prestige later on. So again, it's just album after album of different content and material. 62 is the sensual sound of Sonny Stitt, back on Verve, but now we're talking Creed Taylor era. And here he's playing with the orchestra of Ralph Burns, strings basically. It's Sonny Stitt with strings. It's a bit schlocky at times, but that's Creed Taylor's impact as much as anything. This is also in 62, Low Flame with Sonny Stitt, with that great organ group with Paul Whedon, Don Patterson, and Billy James on the drums. And this is the one-off on Jazzland Riverside right there. Later that same year, his first record for Prestige since 51. That early stuff. He's back at Prestige now. The soul jazz is starting to roll. And what does he do here? He brings in Ray Barretto. And that conga Latin beat gives an awesome soul jazz urban feel, along with the great drummer Art Taylor. And then Eddie Deals on the guitar. And Jack McDuff's on the organ here. And so Jack McDuff is another organist that he plays with quite a lot in 62, 63, 64. He probably works with Don Patterson even longer. Back on Verve, again, we're talking Creed Taylor era Verve now. Billy James on the drums, Paul Whedon on the guitar, Don Patterson on the organ, and you have tenors in orbit, boss tenors in orbit, Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt. Again, it's that battling thing between those 2. Let's put a great rhythm section behind them and they'll go. And again, from 1962, this is the Soul Summit, Sonny Stitt, Gene Ammons with Jack McDuff, with only drummer Charlie Persip. So it's a drummer, an organ player, and these 2 guys throwing down. And these are fun records. And the Ammons Stitt stuff doesn't sound like his average quartet stuff at all. These are pretty explosive records. They usually contain 1 ballad, 1 blues, and then 3 or 4 burners. Fun stuff. Stitt in Orbit, this is recorded in 1962, released in 63 on the Roost label. It's got a few different lineups on it, most of the groups that we've talked about already. So that does seem to be kind of a tidbit record thrown together. And in there somewhere right around this era, in 62, 63, was that Stitt Goes Latin record, which is a bossa nova record, which I have not grabbed. and I need it. Like I said, I used to see it all the time with they had the Mexican sombrero hat on it. Well, it just looks kind of cheesy, and now it's become kind of expensive. Relatively, Stitt stuff doesn't go for big money, but that I've seen that record going for 30 to 60 bucks. I used to see it for 5 to 15. Now Sonny Stitt. This is with O.C. Johnson on the drums, Al Lucas on the bass, and Hank Jones on the piano. And this is on the Impulse label now, 1963. And you gotta love Hank Jones in any setting. He's one of the great players on the piano, as I've said many times. O.C. Johnson's also a legend. And he does 2 records for Impulse here, 2 years apart with other things in between. This is for Pacific, another one-off. Sonny Stitt, My Mother's Eyes, with the organist Charlie Kennard, along with Doug Sides on the drums, Roy Crawford on the guitar. Pacific, whole other side of the country. He's out there all of a sudden. And then again in 1963, Soul Shack. This is Sonny Stitt again with Jack McDuff. And again, you're going to be kind of in that soul jazz vein for these Prestige records. This is with Larry Gaskin on the bass and Herbie Lavelle on the drums. And I love his soul jazz stuff. I think it's got some of the most gospel, Baptist blues pain. It's like Stitt's not this happy-go-lucky guy. He's kind of a drunk loner. And then when he's playing saxophone, when he's recording constantly, he stays a shark needs to swim to breathe kind of thing. You know? This is Sonny Stitt back on Argo again, number 4 or 5 on Argo. Esmond Edwards is still here. This has a Nicky Hill sighting. Attention, Scott Boland, Nicky Hill, along with Gerald Donovan on the drums, Joe DiOrio on the guitar, and Eddie Busters on the bass, I'm guessing. I think I wrote drums twice there, but Nicky Hill's a great saxophone player. He looks like he's playing the alto on this one. He's just kind of in the Chicago scene in this late 50s, early 60s moment. Doesn't get a lot of recordings. He's part of MJT3 with Walter Perkins at VJ and at Argo as well. I love Nicky Hill's playing. But here you got Nicky and Sonny. I'm guessing Sonny's in the tenor on this. Didn't look to see. I think he was playing mostly tenor. He's playing alto and tenor here. He kind of switches to tenor more later, but he even plays baritone on a couple things, which was surprising to me. This is a record I like a lot. This is on Argo, number 744 from 1964 now. And this is with Dorell Anderson, Joe DiOrio, Billy Buster, and Benny Green, the trombonist. There's a track on this I play at my DJ gigs a lot called Flamin' Frost. And it's just so cool and so hip. It almost doesn't sound like it could be from 1964. I should probably try to play it. I hate playing stuff because it's a great way to get an episode taken down or demonetized. Come on. I think I dropped a little bit of this before for you guys, but it's got such a cool, modern kick drum has this kind of click to it, making it sound almost digital. The guitar is just wonderful and clean. Soft kind of Latin horns underneath it. Fantastic stuff. I play that at my gigs quite a lot for lunch, brunch, and it just has this excellent mimosa and an omelet kind of vibe to it. Just a couple of brothers having a good time, Benny and Sonny. Benny's another really kind of underappreciated guy. What a great trombone player. Plays very much a soulful bone. He's not the explosiveness of a J.J. Johnson or a Jimmy Cleveland. Benny Green's more of a laid-back, soul in my bone kind of guy. More swing, more rhythm and blues. But again, just characters. Great song. The production on this is very modern and very engineer now is Ron Mallow. It's channel him. And then Esmond Edwards is still behind this. So great sounding stuff. Some of the best sounding stuff you'll hear from any label at that point. This is Primitivo Soul, Sonny Stitt, Larry Gaskin, Harry Lavelle, and Ronnie Matthews. And then again, he adds a bongo and a congo player, Oswaldo Martinez on the bongos and Marcelino Valdez on the congas. And it adds that soul feel, kind of like what Lou Donaldson was doing at Blue Note. That cool East Coast cool. Sonny Stitt sharing along with Don Patterson, again back with the organ sound, and this is with just Billy James on the drums. So you got a drummer, an organ player. The organ player can also play bass with his feet, and then Stitt playing that wonderful bright alto. Back on Impulse, A52 Salt and Pepper with Paul Gonsalves. I'm not really sure why they put Paul Gonsalves and Sonny Stitt together on a session. They were never really crossed paths that I know of. Not saying of course they must have at some point. Maybe it was Bob Thiel's idea at this point. But O.C. Johnson, Milt Hinton, and the great Hank Jones are the rhythm section on this, which make it worth the price of admission. And Gonsalves is a fantastic player who's renowned for playing with Ellington for a long time. And 56 Newport, it's Gonsalves' solo that kills the place and is kind of an infamy at this point. But this is a really nice little Impulse record. Overlooked Impulse, too. And then 64 is back on Atlantic. And this is with the Marvin Israel art. There's a Coltrane one. There's a Milt Jackson one. There's a Charlie Mingus one. And a Sonny Stitt. So all four of those are pretty big names. Coltrane, Mingus, Milt Jackson, Sonny Stitt. See, he's right in that canon. They only did these cut this guy's artwork for 4 records, all in a row, and they picked their 4 biggest jazz names. So Sonny Stitt should be there with Coltrane and Mingus in their mouths. He's not, though, nowadays. But this is with Richard Davis on the bass, Jim Hall on the guitar, Connie Kay on the drums, and John Lewis on the piano. So you have a couple of modern jazz quartet guys, along with Jim Hall, who's a kind of up-and-coming guitar player, with Richard Davis, who's going to be one of the leading bass players of the 60s. And again, this is 64, so mid-decade. And this is a fairly forward-thinking Sonny Stitt. Still in 65, sorry. Patterson's People. Don Patterson with Sonny Stitt. And guess who they add to the mix? Booker Ervin. And so that's soul jazz with a bit more edge to it because you have Booker on board. And then here you have Sonny Stitt, Soul People with Booker Ervin and Don Patterson. There's a little name for their little group, and if I remember, Billy James on the drums. So again, you see Billy James has been there playing drums for him for just about ever. Back on Roost, Sax Expressions, Sonny Stitt, 65. This is his last recording for Roost. So we've covered from basically 53 to 65 the history of the Roost label, and Stitt's been the backbone of it the entire way. Roy Haynes is on the drums, Ben Tucker's on the bass, with Harold Mayburn making an appearance on the piano. And I think Mayburn's from the Memphis scene, if I remember. But this is a great little session. And again, it's not similar to anything else that's happened. More Don Patterson, the Bossman with Sonny Stitt and Billy James. So you have that organ soul jazz thing going on at Prestige. Sonny Stitt Pow. This is with Benny Green again. On Prestige, though, Kirk Lightsley, Herman Wright, and Roy Brooks. So it's going to be pretty much soul vein just without the organ. Sonny Stitt Nightcrawler with Don Patterson, again with just Billy James. So those 3 guys do quite a bit of work together. And it was probably a pretty simple way to make a payday. We got a drummer, we got an organ player, we got a sax player. We can do this. We can make this cool. I got all the time in the world to fill that space up. Not going to worry about nobody else. This is on Argo again. I think this is his last Argo Cadet record. This is with a guy by the name of Sam Kidd, Phil Thomas, and the great piano player John Young. But Sonny Stitt battling with Zoot Sims, the white tenor player, who's a great player, much cooler and hipper than the kind of bright and fiery and competitive Sonny Stitt. It's a cool record, great cover, interesting time in jazz, 1966. Pretty much done wrapping it up here. We got Sonny Stitt and Bunky Green, Soul in the Night. With Bunky Green, I love Bunky. A great Argo kind of Chicago blues meets soul jazz player. Odell Brown's on the organ with some great Argo records. Maurice White, the drummer from Earth, Wind & Fire, was a jazz drummer first. And then Bryce Robertson's on the guitar. And this is Deuces Wild. Atlantic puts us out in 67 with Billy James, Wilmer Mosley on the drums. And then you have a guest appearance by Robin Kenyatta. And you have a guest appearance by Rufus Harley on the bagpipes. So I think it's kind of Sonny Stitt helping launch those 2 guys And then the last thing I'm going to show you Soul Electricity, Sonny Stitt, Don Patterson, Billy Butler, and Billy James. So that wraps up what the man did over that 14 years. And as you can see, he's going from label to label, making 6, 7, 8 records in a year. It's just astounding, his body of work. So basically what this guy says here about the Roost era of Sonny Stitt is he kind of boxes himself in because he's talking about that Roost box set on Mosaic. And so while he's covering what Stitt does that 10, 12 years, he's actually not really free or at liberty to discuss everything else he was doing at that same time. And so from West Coast sessions to modern sessions to bossa nova sessions to hard bop sessions to cool to bebop, like it's really the full gamut of work here. He was, like I said, he was quite a drinker. If he poured you a drink, he expected you to drink it with him. That was admission to get to talk to the guy, from what a lot of people had to say. And then he also says here, this writer was like, I remember most of this was going on were Stitt's hands. I couldn't take my eyes off them. As he fixed the drink, those long, knobby, branch-like fingers were extended gracefully to hold the cup steady. When he held the drink to me, I looked up at his face. One of his eyebrows went up slightly, as if to say, hey, kid, you're the one who wanted to hang out back here. So I took the drink and sipped it slowly. It's a nice little article written by Mark Myers, was it? And I thought I'd share that with you guys. So again, it's not just my 2 cents. I liked it enough to print it off, so I can't find the first page. Cass must have knocked it over. Yeah, Mark Myers. Good stuff. Sonny Stitt. It's an incredible legacy, one that we should be holding in much higher reverence. It's not just a bunch of thrown together, making money and getting out. And there's probably some sessions where you make that many recordings, you're going to be less invested than others. But a lot of that Don Patterson orchestra stuff's recorded live, and you're always going to get into it with a few drinks and you're live playing the blues. You can't help but fall into it. You can be a drummer and not be bored playing the blues. If you're a sax player, you got all that melody and harmony to play with and all that room to improvise. The blues is a welcome mat to a tired soul. There's a lot of room to just, oh man, stretch out and get that shit out of you. It's good stuff. So anyway, that's today's episode on Sonny Stitt. I know it's a bit of a longer one, but I wanted to share all that with you. I thought it was insightful and interesting. And just the fact that he's recorded for all these labels simultaneously. Atlantic, Verve, Argo, Roost, Impulse. It's Prestige. He's mixing it up. You know, he's doing his thing. The Lone Wolf deserves love. So collect your Sonny Stitt when you see him. They won't be disappointing. That I trust. And when he jumps into some of that double time and quadruple time stuff, he can electrify you. You can just feel his energy and his excitement and his desire to express himself with that horn. He's got things to say. And a guy like the Lone Wolf, he's always going to have something to say. You know what I mean? So I hope you all enjoyed that. Take that with you. Y'all have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. And peace.